Startup Hacks, a We Global podcast. We explore the stories and secret strategies that women entrepreneurs use to save time and money when bootstrapping and building their businesses. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina. Today, I'm excited to welcome Samantha Patil. Welcome, Samantha.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Sam is the CEO and co-founder of The Well-Traveled, the first members-only social platform for travelers. Prior to starting Well-Traveled, Sam built her career in consumer tech and marketing. Her previous roles include leadership positions at Pandora, Snap, and most recently, the Dollar Shave Club. Sam's been featured in multiple podcasts and covered in various publications such as AdWeek and Business Insider. She was also featured in Travel Massive's Top 100 Inspiring Women Travel Founders for 2020. So congratulations, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really nice. It's a great community, Travel Massive.
That's awesome. Well, I'd like to begin the show by having you, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of your background, your story growing up, how you got into the entrepreneurial world so that our listeners can get to know you.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So my background is a little unique. So I was actually born in the UK. My father's British, my mom's from New Zealand. So I grew up for kind of the first 10 years or so, 11 years in England, and eventually moved to the United States. And my dad had traveled throughout most of his career, ended up launching his own company in California. And so I kind of got that travel bug really early on. So I spent the early part of my career at Pandora and a few other tech companies and Snapchat, where I was spending the majority of my time focused on international marketing and business. So I was fortunate enough to get to travel the world really early on in my career, which I really loved. And I think you can probably connect the dots to how we got to where I am today with my travel company. But yeah, I mean, I think my dad was always really entrepreneurial. Like he has had two of his own companies and kind of built his own businesses. So, and again, the travel bug, I think just came from my parents and this international background that they had. And they dragged us all over the place as kids, like, when we were younger. And I think it helps broaden your experience of the world. And I like to say, I think you learn a lot about other cultures when you travel, but I think what's often really interesting is you tend to learn a lot about yourself as well, and how you handle different situations and places that, you feel comfortable, and what happens when you don't feel comfortable when you're traveling. So I love all of that. So.
Well, that's fantastic. For some of our listeners who perhaps are considering starting their own business and maybe they're working kind of in a corporate environment currently, would you mind talking a little bit about that transition for you and, what happened to kind of flip the switch and have you think, I think I'm going to leave the security of a corporate job and go out on my own?
Sure. Yeah. So most recently I was at Dollar Shave Club, and again, focused on kind of international marketing and travel. And so I'd had this idea for a little while, and the idea for the company was really born out of my own frustrations traveling. And so it's something I'd been thinking about for, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so, a little bit longer. And it was one of those ideas. I've had a lot of ideas for companies. I think some better than others. None of them had really stuck. With this one, I kind of just kept coming back to it. And it was, as cliche as it might sound, like kind of just like a gut feeling that I felt like if I don't do this now, it's kind of like a now or never. We don't have kids yet, my husband and I. Like I'd reached a point in my career where I had put in enough years and time to build up, I guess I had enough savings saved up that I could take that risk, which I think is really important financially. I think a lot of people can get really swept up, and yeah, it sounds really exciting to quit my job and launch a company, but at the same time, like you want to make sure that you're in a place where you can do that. So that was really important as well. And I think, my husband and I just kind of were like, I think this is a really cool idea. I think I talked to a lot of people about it. I did some research and it seemed like something people really wanted. And I felt like I would have spent the rest of my life regretting it had I not chosen to go for it. And I just think making sure that you are prepared again, financially, and that you have the support of if you have a significant other or your family or whatever. Because it's definitely hard. I mean, it's really different than waking up every day and kind of like going to a job where you're kind of being told what to do and you have your own responsibilities that are kind of set for you. Whereas when you're starting off, at least initially on your own, you kind of have to be in charge of all of that. So it's definitely a really different experience, but I couldn't be happier that I made that choice. And I feel really lucky that I did have the support that I needed to be able to make that choice as well.
And now, how long has it been since you quit your job and today? Has it been a couple years or a year?
It's been a little over a year. So I left, I think, towards the end of last year. So just over a year.
And so now let's share with the audience what the it is and exactly what your baby is that you created.
Yes, of course. So you mentioned earlier, but Well Traveled is a members only community for travelers, foodies, and adventure seekers. So the goal is to really help our members find and book places that they actually want to go that have been reviewed and vetted by a community they actually trust. So I think a lot of people have struggled to find, travel recommendations because there's kind of this like information overload on the internet, right? Like you start to look for stuff and it becomes really overwhelming really quickly. And so my vision is to really build a solution that is designed for a more modern traveler, that someone who is a younger traveler, they're maybe a little more tech savvy, they travel frequently, and they kind of know a little bit more what they're looking for. So instead of kind of like on TripAdvisor, you might find like 20,000 recommendations for a restaurant in Paris, and you're immediately like, okay, I don't even really know where to start there. We've kind of whittled that down to a more manageable list of maybe it's like 30 or 40. And they've all been sourced from our members directly. So the idea is to kind of give people back that power of recommendations from your peers, that you can then go in and get that feedback from people that you feel like you have a connection with because you're part of this community. Yeah. So from there, sorry, what was your question?
No, I was actually going to ask you, are you, oftentimes when you launch a business, you have a certain target market in mind, and it's usually kind of target market version 1.0, right? and you kind of want to get in there, be successful with that market. And then, in the back of your mind, you say, okay, well, if we get this bucket of people, then we'll expand. Are you thinking that down the road you might expand to other people at different stages in life, like, for example, families?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you're right. I think a lot of startups, you kind of start with your wedge and then expand out, because otherwise you can just try to be all things to all people all at once. And that's a lot to try and focus on. So I think the downfall of a lot of startups can be a lack of focus. So for us, I think, again, this is a really big problem for a lot of people, finding trusted, relevant travel recommendations and booking their travel. But we decided to focus on essentially modern millennial travelers, mostly because they travel the most. They travel 36 nights out of the year on average. They are spending a lot of money on travel. There's 80 million or so millennials in the US, and 26 million are spending at least $5,000 on their next trip. And they really value and prioritize travel over spending on physical goods. So 70% would rather spend on travel than physical goods. And we heard it's a real pain point for them. So more than 40% are saying that travel planning is one of their biggest travel stresses, and they feel like they don't have the tools to make the decisions that they need to make when they're planning their trip. So we kind of felt like this is an audience that is a captive audience, and we should start here. And then, yes, absolutely, like branch out. And I think there's a lot of room for solutions for other people as well, because I think the biggest issue in this industry is a lot of this stuff hasn't really been innovated on in a long time. Like TripAdvisor's been around a really long time. So is Yelp. So is a lot of these bigger companies. And there hasn't been, in my opinion, a lot of innovation to suit the more nuanced needs of today's type of traveler.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I think it's a huge time commitment when you're trying to plan a trip, especially if you're if it's a special trip, and if you really want to take the time to make sure there's great food and there's great activities and there's a great hotel and all of that. And you don't want to get there and feel like, and especially in today's day and age with COVID and the pandemic, everything is just more complicated. So I would think that the pain point is huge, and it would be welcomed by a lot of people. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, COVID has definitely been really interesting, and I think we launched a booking service a few weeks ago, which candidly we were not planning on launching that until next year, just kind of with everything going on. But we heard from people that they were interested in it, and what I'm seeing and what we're seeing is that people are traveling. It's different. It looks a lot different. They're going on domestic vacations or places that are drivable. They're going with like close family versus like large groups, things like that. But I think that that change of scenery is really important for people, and just like their self-care, and even just being able to being stuck at home for a long time. Like, we're not designed to do that. People want to go and explore. So I think, with that, there's a lot of uncertainty that's still out there. And so for us, like, we really want people to feel like, hey, we got your back. If you want to go to this hotel, but they have a 2-night minimum, like, we're going to make that call for you and try to get it to a 1-night minimum. Or if you have to cancel your plans, like, we want to help you with that. Or if you want to know which restaurants have done really great job with all their COVID best practices, and maybe which ones haven't figured it out yet, like, we want to help you out with that. So trying to take the uncertainty out of it.
Yeah. That's excellent. Excellent. So let's talk now about some of the time and money related issues that are connected with startup hacks. So as I'm sure, you starting out, you're a solopreneur, and I would love to hear, some of your time management, self-care, kind of competition, software services, leadership, potentially hacks that you used in order to save time and to maximize your dollars so you could extend that runway while you were building the business.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first one is I hired a co-founder. So I started off on my own, but I think, and honestly, I wasn't planning on bringing on a co-founder, but when I initially came up with the idea, I called Casey, my now co-founder, to talk to her about it, because she has this like fantastic background in membership growth and membership strategy and kind of cultivating communities. And she was so passionate about the project, it made sense for her to come and join me and build the company. And I was so excited that she decided to do that. So that's been honestly a huge, and again, like, I think a lot of people might think that they don't need a co-founder, or they don't necessarily want one, but I would say consider it, because it's really nice to have someone who's as invested in the business as I am, and that is comfortable talking about it 24/7 with me, because not everybody is going to want to hear about your company all the time. So that's been really nice. Obviously not everyone has the ability to get a co-founder or find a co-founder, but finding that person, at least, that maybe it's a mentor in some cases, that you feel like you can have those ongoing conversations with, is a really good outlet, because I think eventually you start staring at things for so long and you're just thinking, am I losing my mind here? Am I thinking about this the right way? Like, I need another opinion. So that's a big one. I will say I love Audible. I'm a huge fan of Audible. So I listen to a lot of books from different entrepreneurs, as well as just thought leadership books. And for me, the time when I do that, because I was feeling like I didn't have time to read these books, was in the morning. I, take my dog for a walk every morning, make my coffee, and I'll listen to these books. And for me, it's a really nice way to, one, just kind of start my day of listening to other entrepreneurs who have had, a lot of failures and a lot of success, and hearing about how they handled those challenges, and then being able to apply that to what I'm dealing with that day, potentially. Mm-hmm. So I find it a really nice way to just kind of get my head right for the day. And there's a few that I've really loved. I think I mentioned before, Drop the Ball by Tiffany Dufu is a great one, specifically for women. I think it talks about being able to do more by doing less, and not feeling like you do have to do everything, which I think can be really tough, of like, what are the things that you have to do, and what are the things that maybe someone else could take off your plate.